everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Universe Within podcast. This episode of the show is being sponsored by my friends over at a company called Real Mushrooms, realmushrooms.com. Sky Chilton and his father, Jeff Chilton. I interviewed Jeff a number of episodes ago. Really interesting guys. I really enjoyed that conversation with Jeff. And it's a company that sells and distributes medicinal mushrooms in powder or capsule form. I was really happy to have these guys come on. I think they were very much in alignment with the values of the podcast. As you all know, a big part of this podcast is about plant medicine, holistic medicine, and I think the benefits of medicinal mushrooms are truly fantastic, and I think there's really a growing body of work that's really showing and alluding to all of the amazing properties that mushrooms have. They sell a lot of different mushrooms, things you've probably heard of, like reishi, chaga, lion's mane, turkey tail, cordyceps. Those are all mushrooms I work with. They're part of what I consider for myself a really holistic supplement regime. And the thing I really love about their company, not only are they really good guys, I think they're really ethical guys, but the product is really amazing. It's all 100% mushrooms. They're organic, and that's really rare. For better or for worse, the supplement industry is highly unregulated, and so often when you get supplements, you don't necessarily know what you're getting. You may be getting some mushroom, you may be getting a bunch of fillers and other things. Oftentimes, even when you're buying what may be a mushroom, it may not have any of that mushroom in it at all, unfortunately. Even some of the big, I think even the biggest company that sells mushrooms, actually it's not the fruiting body, not the mushroom itself. It's the mycelial, which is grown on grain, and then those things are mixed up and then sold in a supplement form. So not only are you not getting the mushroom itself, you're getting the mycelium mixed with grain. So it's one of the amazing things of Real Mushrooms is it's exactly that. It's real mushrooms. So it's 100% mushrooms, organic. So you're getting a really good product. You're getting the actual fruiting body, the mushroom itself, 100% of that. And again, just really great guys. I'm really happy to have them on and supporting this podcast. So if you'd like a really good product, you'd like to start working with medicinal mushrooms, check out their site, realmushrooms.com. And also listeners of this show, if you go to their site, realmushrooms.com/universe, you get 25% off your first order, which is a really good deal. And I think once you start working and tasting their products, you'll really see and feel a big difference. So thank you to them. And I think that's it. And without further ado, here is the intro to the show. On this episode of the podcast, I sat down with my friend Alexander or Sasha Lasarev. I met Sasha a long time ago, many years ago, through a mutual friend of mine, or a mutual friend of ours, who was also in the podcast, John Keegan. Sasha's a really fascinating guy. When I met him, he was a dating coach. He was very big into cryptocurrency. He had begun working with plant medicines, and he's had just a really fascinating life. So we sat down and we talked about his background, a rather traumatic childhood, kind of his origins of also coming from communism and the impact that had on his life, how that also, I think, really allowed him to have a deeper insight and to see more clearly into one of the things that he was very outspoken about and that I had a lot of respect for him, which was kind of his voice during the COVID pandemic, and I think really speaking truth and speaking out, speaking different narratives, which I think were super important. He had a video that went viral where he was actually attacked by a medical doctor for voicing his opinion, which kind of shows some of the craziness, the division of that time, and I think a lot of the energy that was being felt around the world. So we spoke about that, about his spiritual journey. He's also a comedian. We spoke about comedy, the power of comedy, some projects that he's working on, kind of the power of digital currency, and just a lot about consciousness and spirituality and the power of unifying, the power of love. I think it was a really beautiful conversation. For some people, some of these ideas, they may seem quite strange, but if they do, especially ideas around the COVID pandemic, as I read during the podcast, a lot of these ideas that he and I were speaking of have come to be shown even by the U.S. government as being very true. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that, a lot to be understood, a lot to see how psychological forces, fear, division can really have a huge impact on people, and how there are other views that can be very important. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you'll gain a lot from it. As always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a really good option. It's a website you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, thank you very much to the people supporting that way. And if you're able to do that, that's a really big help. It's really what allows me to continue making these episodes. And I really like the idea because it's built on this idea of reciprocity. So if you feel like you're gaining something, it's a really beautiful way to give back. If you're not able to do that, as always, just doing some of the small things to help with the algorithms. If you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. So I think that's it. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Sasha.
From the maze, running out from the maze, running out of the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out from the maze today. I'm running out from the maze, running out from the maze. Run out of the maze today.
So cool. This was a long time coming, I think. I met you, I don't know how many years ago, but it was in Miami, and it was through a mutual friend of ours, John Keegan, who I also had on the podcast. And I think you're a fascinating guy. You know, it was interesting. Kind of in my personal life, I had a big change at the beginning of the pandemic. Actually, it just said an error occurred. Please try again.
Really?
I'm not sure what that is.
That gives me an excuse to turn off this heater, which might make noise.
Yeah.
So
But I think everything's still good. But yeah, go for it. Turn it off.
just be slightly quieter. But I think with this high quality mic, it doesn't really matter actually. So it's all good either way.
Yeah.
Cool.
So cool, man. So yeah, we met in Miami through a mutual friend, John, and you're a fascinating guy. I mean, we had some interesting conversations. I think you've switched a lot since then. I remember I was kind of trying to explain to you some American values, and there was I think some pushback from your Canadian side on that. But I think you've really evolved and actually really evolved in an amazing way, and really kind of taken a big step. I mean, in my personal life, COVID was an interesting time. That's when I kind of began to transition from one job to another. I was working in a big ayahuasca center called the Temple of the Way of Light. The pandemic shut that down. I had already been thinking about, I'd already been doing my own personal work, but I had been thinking about kind of splitting my time between the two. But the pandemic kind of very much made that decision easy for me, because it shut it down, and I ended up moving out of the jungle to where I am now in the Sacred Valley of Peru, and just begin to do my work full time. But it was very interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, I also made this decision to start this podcast. And, I think for a while, I was maybe fairly neutral in terms of the entire pandemic for probably the first 2 weeks. And then it became very apparent to me what was happening. And I think I was quite vocal about it, but I was very surprised how many people weren't questioning things, the fear, just the entire narrative, the complete lack of science. And, it's an interesting thing because we all have our different specialties. Certainly no one, I think, is an expert in every area of life, but I think some of my expertise very much spoke to the pandemic. I mean, I work with medicine. I've studied government my whole life. I mean, that was my major in school. My family works for the government, military, different things. So I was very aware of the nature of government. In general, to put it short, not good. And just the entire narrative of virology, of immunology, of all of these things coming together. And for me, it was quite apparent. But it was very interesting because at the same time, a bit on this podcast, I began to speak out about some of the things, and some of those episodes were censored, demonetized. I had warnings, strikes, and so those things were very real too. At the same time, a lot of my friends and colleagues, I think, kind of in this plant medicine world, I was very surprised in that either they were going along with the narrative or in private they saw something different, but in public they were very afraid to speak out. And I think that's when I really started noticing a lot of the work you were doing and kind of transitioning to a new area of work yourself, and really respected that of you really kind of taking a stand. I mean, I think not only your reputational risk, but maybe as we'll get into, even your physical risk by doctors. So I have a lot of respect for you in that. So I'm sure we'll get into that, and just your background. I think you're doing a lot of really amazing work. I think you were also one of the pioneers in digital currency. You were one of the people, along with John, that got me involved in that, and again, more so than just a financial level, really a principle of why those things are good, and how they're very empowering, and not just on a personal level, but really in a kind of a paradigm altering view of how that can really shift and change the world. So that's kind of a lot. That's probably the longest I've ever spoken in an intro. But maybe there may be some of my listeners who have heard of you. I think this conversation is a little outside the norm of just kind of strictly plant medicine. But I would imagine a lot haven't. So maybe you can just talk a bit about yourself, something that for some people they like, some people they don't, but a bit about your background, who you are, where you came from, what your journey in life has been, and what's brought you to the point you're at now. And by the way, we almost died together too. So
We
that's
almost died. You would think that would be the first. Me and this gentleman, he's an interesting guy, but we almost died together, which is fascinating. Um, well, you're really building up my ego there. I'm trying to be more spiritual, so I'm trying to keep it down. I'm trying to just be it. But this one time, because it's a podcast and I like you, I'm gonna talk about myself. It's an exception. It's an exception. Um, wow, where to begin? Well, I consider myself. I should warn everybody that I consider myself the world's first spiritually enlightened conspiracy theorist. That means I've realized we're all one eternal consciousness experiencing itself in infinite forms forever and ever. And our root core nature is love. But I can't prove it. But okay, so just to get one joke out of the way, because I'm technically a comedian, just one. Now I'll be serious for the rest of the thing. But was born in Canada. Parents came from Soviet Union, so I'm actually used to communism, which is useful when you're from Canada, and and it's 2024. It's less, you know what I'm saying? Oh yeah, it's communism again. It's in the blood. It's okay. You can deal with it. So I didn't really have much of an upbringing, and I think my soul chose for me a really brutal childhood because I really needed that for my own awakening so that I could be of service to others. That makes sense now, but at the time it was just a really shitty childhood. My dad ran away from my crazy mom when I was 3 years old, and my mom had a lot of unprocessed trauma. So she Soviet Union, like proper communism, it's brutal. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that everybody's traumatized from that era. So she would just, she would throw big Russian boots at my head. She would tell me I would amount to nothing when I grew up. So she did have a spiritual side. Lots of violence, and mainly psychological. So I was really that really run down kid with no self-love, no belief in myself, have no idea who I am. And it was a struggle for me. Life was a struggle. I couldn't make friends. I was super, super shy around women later in life. So I really had a crappy, crappy childhood. a lot of scarcity coming from communism, right? So it's like really weird money stuff, like, I can't buy stuff. There's not, there's a lot of scarcity. Um, and so I just took, like a lot of people inherit money from their parents. I inherited a lot of trauma. That was my inheritance. Some money too, but mainly trauma. So my journey of healing really stems from that crappy childhood. But that really, going into that healing journey, that really was the beginning of my entire healing and spiritual journey. It really stems from me picking that situation of like a highly abusive. It was always like manic. She would be like rageaholic. She would go from like just yelling, face red, throwing stuff at me, like, to like really nice for like 10 minutes, and then back to rageaholic. So my whole childhood, I was fundamentally at war. It's like my own mother was trying to kill me for my entire childhood, until I ran away from home when I was about 15 years old. And then from there, I went and started healing and started building out my life. But that was the roots, really, of this story.
And so, how did that shape your life? I mean, what did you end up in university, in school? Were you pursuing something? I mean, because when I met you, you had a very interesting career. That's
Mm-hmm.
how we also
So
met you, through John. What was that like for you, or earlier on, kind of after coming out of the childhood home, beginning to move into your own path?
so I had this weird intuition when I was pretty young. I was probably around 17. I was watching a comedian on TV, and the comedian just wasn't funny. And I thought to myself, I'm funnier than this guy. Followed by the thought, I'm going to do stand up comedy. So for some weird reason, I just got this idea in my head, and I went and I signed up for an open mic, and I got some jokes together. And I started doing comedy at age 17, which was a real blessing, because that was the first way I started to actually connect with people and started to get, laughs, get love from other people. And I really started working on a craft. I started working on myself. And I wanted it really, really bad. So I worked really, really hard to actually get good and get funny. And over many, many years and doing many, many shows, I did actually get funny. And by the time I was 23, I left Canada, because Canada, not so great for that. But I went to the UK, and by the time I was 23, I was earning a living as a stand-up comedian. Not like crushing it, but was getting by doing that. And that was a really wonderful time in life, just focusing on comedy. And somewhere around that time, in fact, earlier, I noticed I had health problems. I had so much tension from my childhood in my body. I had like a leg seize up, like weird stuff. And I started seeing chiropractors. I started going to the gym because I knew I had to improve. And I actually was already beginning my healing journey, though I was still in my 20s, still very, very angry, frustrated, but already through comedy working on myself. And then what happened was, a big problem for me, late teens and throughout my mid 20s, late 20s, I was terrible with women. I'm talking like, I love women. I'm cursed with this condition called heterosexuality. It's very difficult, paired with a high sex drive and no social skills. I'm telling you, Jason, it's awkward. And so I was just terrible, and I decided I had to deal with the situation. And through, again, a whole series of miraculous events, I got into a whole subculture that was at the time quite kind of growing, the pickup subculture, where men basically learn about confidence and flirting and social skills, all this kind of stuff, to be able to go and speak to women, to to go on dates, to get girlfriends, all this kind of stuff. So I went really deep into that rabbit hole, and I ended up being going so deep, I ended up coaching, and I actually ended up being one of the pioneers of a part of that culture, which was called day game, which was the art of meeting and connecting with women in the daytime. So rather than like going to a club and getting women drunk and spending money and all the stuff that I thought was very inauthentic for me, certainly, I was teaching men, hey, you could just actually be yourself, be funny, express yourself, be direct, tell women you find them attractive, ask women on a date, don't, express yourself. Don't be afraid of the rejection, but do that in the daytime. Talk to women in a coffee shop. Talk to a woman in a park. Talk to a woman in a lineup. It doesn't matter. You're a human being. She's a human being. Be bold. Talk to people. And that kind of took off. I filmed some videos of me running around the streets, just flirting with women, just being myself. And some of those really went viral around 2011. They really started kind of going viral. And so I yeah, that was what I was known for. I used to go by Sasha Day Game, so some people might be watching this and go, they would have probably recognized me by now. But it was a really fun time, and I helped many men stop being afraid of rejection. Don't, because that was a really deep lesson, and probably one of the reasons I spoke out later as the pandemic was rolling out. I got really good at expressing myself without worrying about what other people think about me. You have to do that. You have to do that if you really want to be successful in life. And most people don't ever go through that as a ritual. Most people actually conform, keep their mouth shut, do what they think they're supposed to do. They don't say things that might get them judged or that may be controversial. People play it safe as a general rule. And that's frankly one of the major reasons why humanity got to this point, is because people don't speak out because they're afraid. And as a dating coach for many years, I was kind of infamous for making men specifically do these social freedom exercises that were socially uncomfortable, where everyone's going to think you're weird, but you do it anyway because you push through. You push through, and you just break through that fear. Just as a fun example for your audience, like I'd make guys like walk up to couples and just look at them in the eye and say, "Excuse me, you guys look like you're from around here. Quick question: I'm actually buying a gift for my ex-girlfriend. I want to get her something that says, I like you as a friend, but not that I want to get back together. Do you guys have any advice on what would be a great gift to give to my girlfriend?" And they'll be like, I'm not sure. Maybe some chocolate or something. I'll be like, "Okay, thanks very much," and they'll go for a handshake. Jason, you would not believe the amount of people that would look at my hand like it's disgusting and then would still shake my hand after me full on picking at my nose for 2 minutes. It's unbelievable because people are so programmed to shake someone's hand. Even when you got booger on your hand, people will shake your hand. That tells you a lot about humans right there and how programmed most are. So because that was kind of my specialty, is like being fearless and going for it. I just got to a point where I was just very good at expressing myself without caring what other people thought about me. And that's just kind of my personality, and that's kind of part of my deal. So, anyway, so that was a big part of my life, becoming being a dating coach. And that continued going on quite well and was quite successful. And then my spiritual journey kind of kicked off around 2009. And I had my first kind of mystical awakening experience. That's a whole story. And so that both of these things were happening at the same time. My spiritual awakening and healing was continuing. I was a dating coach, and around 2015, I sensed like I didn't want to do the date coaching thing anymore. I was past it, standing around, on microphones, listening to men flirt with women. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And the moment I said, okay, I'm not going to do this, and I taught my last course, as soon as I did that, man, downloads started coming in on like my life and what I'm here to do, and my mission on a really profound level. And that was a really big lesson when you actually say, okay, when you say no to what's not in alignment, the universe gives you and shows you what is in alignment for your life. And that was really huge around 2015. So I stopped teaching those courses, continued on the spiritual path, had a lot of crazy experiences. From 2009, they began, and those continued. I did a couple of breatharian initiations. Those were profound. I started working with ayahuasca in 2012. I then got stories around that as well. And things just kept rolling forward with tons and tons of crazy oneness and love and spiritual awakenings, peaking out at around 2021. And around 2020, when all this stuff was happening, I was one of the first people, as far as I can tell, around 2020, to speak out, because I knew it was fake. I knew it was not authentic. I knew that it was just propaganda. And so very early on in 2020, I started flyering people, talking about love and fear and the differences between the two, and a little bit of information about the governments and big pharma and all this kind of stuff. I was flyering in 2020, actually in Ecuador, where I was. And when I got back to Canada, I attended my first freedom rally. I think it was about September. And as soon as I came to that first freedom rally and I saw so many people in their hearts awake, speaking out, I'm telling you, spirit took a hold of me. It lit my ass on fire. And that was it. That was my tribe. And I knew Spirit was like, okay, your job right now is to use your influence, followers, money, all your comedy skills, whatever you have. Your job is to wake up as many people as you can in this moment, and that's all I did. And because I'd gotten into crypto early on, I didn't, I had enough money to just continue doing my freedom activities without having to worry about income. So I just full on started, going to protests, eventually organizing marches, like really funny, interesting marches that would really get people thinking, making funny videos, everything, doing stand-up comedy all across Canada about the insanity that was unfolding. I started having underground comedy shows at locations in secret in Vancouver, including my basement. Super, super fun. And that was my job. That was my full-time job, is to wake people up so people didn't fall for the propaganda and didn't get the, you know what? And which for me seemed really obvious. It's like the creator of all that has made the planets, the stars, all of our bodies that work perfectly, our eyeballs, everything works amazing. But the creator of all that is messed up on your immune system. Your immune system sucks. But don't worry, the creator made Bill Gates, who's going to fix your immune system. Doesn't really add up to me, Jason. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense to me. So I did lots of crazy videos, and the most infamous of which was the one of me on the megaphone doing my comedy jokes, telling everybody, hey, keep trusting the government, guys. They love you so much. Bill Gates loves you so much. Just keep doing what you're told without thinking for yourself and without using logic or reason. You're all doing a great job. And just trolling, having fun with it. And then, of course, somebody attacks me with a bike, like insane, smashes my car with their bike, and that was all on film. So that video went super viral all over the planet. That was insane. And then that got me like on Alex Jones' show and David Knight's show and all this stuff. And yes, so to date, even though I've had a few, that's probably the craziest video I've been involved in. And I'll pause there because I was talking for a long time.
Amazing. Yeah. So there's a lot to get into. So kind of going back to the first kind of profession you had that you spoke about, this idea of a dating coach. I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of stigma around that. I think a lot of people look at it as somehow sleazy, or I remember even one of the early books, I forget the guy's name, Neil, maybe something,
Neil
but
Strauss, the game.
yeah,
Yeah.
the game. I mean, even that title, it makes it, even that word game, I mean, you can take that different ways. You can take it as something more lighthearted, but you can also take it as something a bit cynical, like you are playing a game, and you're playing a game with people's emotions, their lives. And yet, at the same time, what you were speaking about is this idea of building confidence, of overcoming fear, of putting people in uncomfortable situations. And even in relation to a lot of plant work, or for lack of a better term, spiritual work, I mean, a big aspect of that work is going outside of your comfort zone, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, pushing you to the limit where you actually begin to also question, like, who am I? Because so many of those beliefs that we have, so many of those limiting beliefs are part of what could be said is the ego. Like, I am this, or I am not this, I'm not enough, I'm not good at talking to people, I have these fears, I have these limitations. And so I think a big part of that work is often maybe misunderstood, and there is something empowering about it. And at the same time, so much of history, and this is a huge subject, but even in a more kind of spiritual principle, I mean, there's always this play of duality, of a pendulum, of moving between two extremes. And certainly for a lot of human history, recent human history, I think you can very well argue that the feminine, women's issues have been suppressed. There's been difficulties. There's been huge challenges. I think luckily many of those have been overcome, and yet there still are challenges. But I think one thing that often people don't speak about, and I think it is becoming more obvious, is also the challenges that men face. And I think those are often overlooked because some of the archetypal quality of the masculine is this idea of silence, of holding on to our pain, of not sharing, of being stoic, of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, of being a man, being a rock. And I think a lot of those, while they're very beneficial, they can cause men to suffer too. And as a society, we are moving in a direction where we are, I think, suppressing a lot of these masculine characteristics, like speaking up, like taking a stand, which I think maybe is part of what you were speaking to in the COVID pandemic too, is this idea that there's not enough people speaking out, that there's not enough people, one, who can actually see, who can diagnose, but two, who've been taught to actually stand on principle. And I think a lot of those forces have been suppressed. What was that like for you working with men? Because you worked with so many men. I'm sure there's a lot of patterns you saw, kind of traumas, not only that come from childhood, but even from society, conditions that men were going through that really hindered them, that kept them from being free, that kept them from finding a voice. Because, it may seem like something simple, dating or finding love, but I mean, that's the most primal thing in the world is union, that joining and that finding of that. And I think even if you look at a lot of societies right now, especially in more developed countries and places like Japan and Korea. I mean, I was reading a statistic the other day where I think most men at 30 years old are still virgins. Like they haven't found a physical partner. And a lot of that is they don't have the skills. They're shy. They've been traumatized. And it's creating societal huge implications. I mean, even to the point where 20 years ago we were speaking about overpopulation. Now a lot of people are speaking about underpopulation, that society may begin to collapse because we don't have enough people. And a huge part of that is because there's not healthy relationships that are forming.
Yeah,
That was a
that's
big,
crazy.
big one. I don't know where you want to take that, but
That's a big one. But I'm with you. I'm still able to focus on conversations because I never took the clout shot. So I'm right there with you. Um, I would say that the attack from I call them the forces that work, as we can see them actually being exposed, and I do believe the forces of darkness are literally being kicked off the planet right now. So they're not really running the show anymore, but they have been running the show for a very long time, and their attacks have been on pretty much all beings. Economically, they want everybody enslaved. Food health wise, the water, psychologically, everybody's got all these beliefs and programs in there that are really not beneficial. And certainly, of the groups being targeted, men are very high up on the list because we're the warriors, we're the change makers. Like if men rise up and they're in their power, they can, what I'm saying, they can make something happen. So if you have the men totally in fear, uh, you know, not in their power, don't know who they are, don't know how to speak their truth, don't know how to stand up, don't know how to fight, out of shape, mentally unfit, and this is something for the men, but for everybody, spiritually disconnected from the truth of their nature. That if you ask me, of everything, that is the number one war that's going on. It's a war on spirituality, actually, and you can actually see that on so many levels. They don't want you to know what you really are, because you can't, if you know that you and the universe, whether you want to call it universe, source energy, Christ consciousness, presence, but it is the one. We are all that one, that immortal self, that capital S. That's what we are, having an experience. But if you know you are that one, you're going to speak up. You're not afraid. You're not afraid of what people think, other egos, what other personality structures might think about your personality. Who cares? If you know who you are, you're going to speak up and you're going to do what's right, even if it may result in your losing a job or being in prison or even death. Because to truly know the self is to know there is no death. Death is just another birth. That which we are can never be killed. We are and have always been here in this now moment. We are all that is. So anybody who's had an inkling of that reality is far more likely to speak their truth, to act in integrity, for the benefit of all beings on this planet. Because you know what I'm saying. And also, there's a deeper. It's not just that. It's like, to understand what you are is to understand how the universe works. This spiritual knowledge is what the biggest threat to the forces that were. Because if you're truly in integrity and you absolutely do what you know is right, you know that you're not going to manifest some horrific thing happening to you, losing your job or being thrown in jail, unless it's actually in your soul's blueprint. If you're supposed to manifest some kind of really difficult experience for your soul's growth and evolution, you will. But if you're not, and you're simply supposed to speak your truth and say no when it's a no, you would know that you're protected. If you lose your job for speaking out or for saying no, the universe that is yourself is going to arrange things so that you will find another way to feed your family, right? The universe is always conspiring to help all beings in their journey and their evolution. So this whole pandemic was a massive opportunity for souls to either trust the universe, speak their truth, have faith in what's happening, and really, really, really tune in and go, actually, you know what? I know what's right and wrong, and I'm gonna make a stand here, or not. And a lot of people chose not, and the result of that is, unfolding before us in quite a dramatic manner for those that are paying attention. But I really believe humanity manifested this massive opportunity for our evolution, and it's an opportunity for all souls to really see what the world is, and to see our own shadow, and to see where we're at in our evolution. And what we saw was a lot of people are afraid, a lot of people are brainwashed, and even the ones who aren't brainwashed, who can see what's happening, would rather have their salary or their reputation than risk it all and speak the truth and maybe save a lot of lives out there. And that's what we saw, and that's sad. That's sad, and as brutal as it is, I do believe that it was necessary to spark the global awakening of our race, of all humans on the planet, and we're going into that very, very quickly now. And it sucks that so many people have to suffer and die. It's brutal, losing their jobs, watching. I mean, I can't even imagine the suffering that this has caused. But I know we're going to be in a much better place as the human race in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, because of what's happened there. And I do believe if it hadn't happened, we might have been on a much worse timeline where everybody gets enslaved on the planet and there is no way out. That's where things were headed. And so that was a reset. That was a reset and an opportunity for humanity to frankly wake up and get our shit together. And I do believe we are getting our shit together as a collective at this time.
So you mentioned slavery, and I think that's a fascinating topic. It's so many people, we watch these movies, maybe in a North American context about slavery, or even these movies that are very popular, like Braveheart. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's essentially about slavery, about someone coming in and taking over your people. You watch a movie like Star Wars, it's the Rebel Alliance, this kind of grand force of evil that's out there that wants to control, that wants to enslave. And there's these fascinating psychological experiments. I mean, I think one with slavery is really, especially probably for a lot of the people listening to this, maybe in North America, where at one point we did have slavery. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, the entire world had slavery, and I think that's often kind of, we forget about that. I mean, even that word slave, it comes from the word Slav, and slavery was going back to that idea of cosmovision. It was something that was just always there. Like slavery, that idea that we couldn't be enslaved is something that's quite revolutionary. And I think that's why when people watch these kind of movies, they're very inspired, because it awakens in them this idea of truth. But there's these fascinating psychological experiments, like where you ask a classroom, who would have opposed slavery if you lived 500 years ago? And something like, I don't know the exact percentage, but let's say like 95% of the people will raise their hand. Yes, of course, I would have been the one who opposed that. And yet, obviously, that's not true, because it was a very, very small percentage of people who, in any given point of time, actually opposes that. A very small percentage of people. So the reality is most of us would have gone along with those narratives. That's just human nature. One of the interesting things that you were talking about, particular to your background, and it may be a bit similar to my background, I mean, a couple generations removed, but is this idea of coming from the Soviet Union, coming from a communist country, and I was actually recently, we're watching Chernobyl again. I'd seen it before, but the series, I'm watching it with my wife. She had never seen it. And, it's very fascinating because it's the same idea. You always have to say and to hear and to speak what the party wants you to speak. They'd actually never want you to speak truth, even though when it's very obvious, but the power, the narrative, the force that's driving from the top down is so strong that you'll willingly lie to go along with that. And I think one of the other really fascinating things with communism, which I think you spoke about, it's this idea that power comes from man and that ultimate power, ultimate knowledge resides in the hands of man. And that's a very modern phenomenon. When you look at traditional cultures all over the world, they don't see power in man. They don't look to man as some authority figure on some top-down structure who disseminates information. As you said, they look to God, and that's where supreme wisdom comes from. And I think that's something we've become very disconnected from, and something that I saw, very much the propaganda around the pandemic was this very similar propaganda that you find in communist countries. It's that all of the solutions, all of the knowledge, all of the expertise resides in the hands of man, and that you as an individual, you'll never know, you'll never have that supreme authority. That can only come in the hands of man. And I think that's something where we've gotten very far removed from. But I think you already touched on this, but were there parallels that you saw from your own upbringing of kind of that mentality that maybe gave you more of a window into this? But because I think that is a common archetype of people who have lived through that. You can see it with Venezuelan refugees, like here in Peru. Like I speak to Venezuelans all the time. And the ones who left, now, it can be slightly skewed because they're the ones who left, but they're very aware of what's going on. Like they're very aware of those top-down power structures and how destructive, how really evil they are, and how those forces control people. Do you think that kind of your background gave you maybe some insight where it allowed you to see things a little bit clearer because it's certain patterns that are repeating and you were able to recognize those?
I think to a degree, because I heard a bunch of stuff from my grandma about what Soviet Union was like, so I knew communism was very evil, and I knew how it, to a degree, how it operated. But I did grow up in Canada myself. But for me, I think it's really more just about my soul. Like I'm just an old soul, and I came here with a unique mission to help humanity awaken to our true nature as all that is. And so I just knew the system was BS, even as a kid. They're trying to teach me stuff in school, and I'm just looking at it going, I don't need this. This is BS. This is brain. I knew at a very young age this is brainwashing. I don't need this. This is not for my benefit. I've always known that on a deep level. So yeah. So I've been awake for a really long time. And in terms of like, I read a David Icke book like in 2003. So that just confirmed everything. And I was like, oh, that's what's up. Excellent. So I would say to a degree, but really, I think certain souls are just, we just know. Some people just know what's going on. And interesting, what you were talking about slavery. The reality is, most people on this planet are slaves, to varying degrees. I mean, if you pay taxes to a criminal organization, they like to call themselves government and pretend that they have authority, but they don't. They're private corporations. Voting is all fundamentally has been proven to be fake most of the time. So it's it's a complete illusion, right? The royal bloodlines knew that people aren't going to do what the king says, so they went, well, we'll make it government, and we'll just control the money, and we'll put the people in. It's the greatest. There's a lot of scams, but government's a really good one. So, fundamentally, it's the craziest belief ever that some people have authority to tell other people what to do. No. If you understood your true nature, you would know we are all unique aspects of the eternal one consciousness, source energy that we are. And the golden rule is do no harm to others. Treat others as you would like to be treated, as they'd like to be treated. Spread love, and do whatever is in integrity with truth, and do absolutely no harm to any other being. That is universal law. That is God's law. That's the only law we should be living by. Governments don't live by it. If anything, they do the opposite. They're literally opposite to truth. That's what government is. It's mind government, is mind control. They're in the business of mind control. And so it's always been the case. I would love to see some evidence of recent in modern times of really great governments working hard for the people. I'd be really surprised. There have been benevolent dictators before, for sure. There were monarchies and people who were just in power and actually trying to do good for the people. That has existed. But fundamentally, this idea that we need to be ruled, the fact that people believe that and are okay paying taxes to some beings out there that are clearly out of integrity and clearly lying and using it for war and are corrupt, that tells you everything about the human condition right there. It's slavery. It's slavery. If you're giving up your work, your labor, and you're giving that to some other beings, and you have no choice, you're basically being blackmailed into it. Do it, or they come after you and you go to jail and you get in trouble. Whatever it is, it's extortion. It's blackmail. It's out of alignment with truth. It's out of alignment with source, and everyone's going along with it, and everyone knows it's wrong. That's what's fascinating. If you ask most people, do you trust the government? Do you think they're doing good? Most people will go, no. But you still pay your taxes. You still do what you're told. Why? Because it's too terrifying to think what might happen if you actually went, no, not going along with that. You can't even go there because they're slaves. In their mentality, they are in belief systems. They are fundamentally slaves, which is insane. A beautiful paradox, because actually you are the creator of all that is in a human body, and you think you're a slave, and that is what makes, and that's a big part of what makes this human game we're playing the most fascinating and the craziest game of all, because we're born into this world fundamentally that's been controlled by the forces of darkness, and into basically a slave system, right? And you can, in that, you have the opportunity to awaken to your true nature as infinite unconditional love. It's unbelievable to go from what you think you are, this limited, smart monkey paying your taxes, struggling to make it in this world, to go from that to I am all that is. I am eternal. We are all one consciousness on this planet. We are the energy that has created all life, all universes everywhere. I am that. And that is the ultimate truth of reality, and I'm going to live that, and I'm going to be that love in this world. That's the craziest video game the creator could ever make to play, and that's the game we're in. It's fun.
So just for people, like, if anyone is thinking like what you're saying is crazy, I mean, just from a perspective from the U.S., which I think a lot of people aren't familiar with, as you were saying, the idea that your labor could be taxed and that you would have to pay a government for your labor is an absolutely crazy idea. And had you asked any American, literally, what are we in 2024 now, 100 years ago, or actually a little over 115 years ago, they would have agreed with exactly what you said. And, this is probably a big subject, but if people are interested in looking into it, there's a lot of good literature out there. But with the coming of World War I, and again, the fear around that, which is a very common theme, fear around war, whether it's war against another country or war on terrorism, war on a virus.
Created by the bankers.
Very similar.
It's amazing. Yeah. They make the wars. They fund both sides of the army. They've been doing this the entire time. And they loan the money to the armies to fight each other. It creates lots of trauma, lots of debt, enslaves people, enslaves countries, and now everybody's got to work real hard to pay the governments to pay back the debt for the war that the private bankers started in the first place. It's amazing. It's fantastic. Yeah. I'll tell you the other really fun scam that's just as good. Poison the food, poison the water, poison the air, poison everything, get everybody sick. Ban and suppress any natural solutions that are actually in alignment with nature, and tell everybody, no, you need to eat fake chemical food, drink fluoridated tap water. If you get sick, don't worry, get some chemotherapy, take these antidepressants. Just don't worry about all those other energy healing and healing trauma. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Just go with big pharma. They're going to take care of you. It's amazing, the idea that irradiate yourself. If you have cancer, radiate yourself, destroy your immune system. That's going to help you. And people go along with that. Do you know how crazy that is? That's like saying, hey, do you want to live forever? Take a gun, put it in your mouth and pull the trigger. You're going to live forever. It's literally opposite land, and people go for it. This is how lost people are. We're living in clown land, opposite land, clown land. That's what this planet is.
Yeah. Yeah, let's circle back to the aspect of health a little bit later, but I want to get back to again that idea of as you were speaking about tax and war. I mean, with that idea, with World War One, again, that fear and propaganda came because there wasn't any such thing as an income tax. That would be considered the most un-American thing in the world, that you would pay the government on your labor. You know, even the idea of tax was always for a gain, but your labor is not a gain. It's an equal exchange. I give you 5 hours of my labor, you give me 2 chickens. There's no reason the government should be involved in that transaction at all. But again, based on that fear, based on that propaganda, that there's this enemy that's going to come into the US, take it over, which never would have happened, never will happen. I mean, even just geographically, that will never happen. But from that, the income tax came about. And it was this idea of this temporary tax. We need to generate money to build the military, to fight this enemy. Once the war is over, that will stop. That never happened. Also, once you have an income tax, you need an agency to collect that. So that's when the IRS was created, and you need a centralized bank to be able to print and to disseminate money. So all of those things were created, and that's not that long ago. And yet the consciousness that's shifted extremely far from that moment. Going back to COVID. Something I just like to read because this is something where a year or two, probably even a year ago, but for sure 2 years ago, many of these things I spoke about, and again, this channel was censored, it was demonetized, it had strikes. I believe everything I'm reading now should not get us stricken, because this is actually an official report from the U.S. government, from a sub-select committee from the House. It was a bipartisan committee, and this is a recent report that they just released. So this is literally coming from the United States Congress. These are a few points which I had written down. It's a huge report, but a few things that I noted. They say that COVID originated from a lab in Wuhan. They say most of the evidence points to that. That's something that would have got us censored 2 years ago. They say gain-of-function research contributed to that. Again, something that would have had us censored a couple of years ago. They say the World Health Organization, their global response was a failure. Again, if you questioned that 2 years ago, you would have been censored. They said social distancing was arbitrary and not based on science. Again, that was the science 2 years ago. We would have been censored for that. They said that masks were largely ineffective. Again, 2 years ago, we would have been censored on that. They said that lockdowns caused, quote unquote, immeasurable harm. Would have been censored 2 years ago for that. They said public health officials spread misinformation. Again, would have been censored for that. They said COVID vaccines did not stop transmission. 2 years ago, we would have been censored for that. Vaccine mandates were not supported by science. Would have been censored 2 years ago for that. Public health officials ignored natural immunity. If you spoke about natural immunity, would have been censored. Lockdowns closed this is in the US, more than 160,000 businesses. If you talked about the dangers of lockdown, you would have been censored. Science never justified school closures. Children have, quote unquote, suffered greatly from these policies. If you questioned that 2 years ago, you would have been censored. These are just a few of the things that are now an official finding of the US government. These are all things that I think myself, you, many others realized fairly early on, and yet there was a cognitive dissonance. None of these things were new. These things were seen relatively quickly, and yet most people either didn't or didn't want to see them or acknowledge them. And I think, as you said, a big part of that is fear and going along with a herd mentality. For you, what were the things that you saw that led you to believe that the narrative that was being pushed at the time, which is very much not the narrative of what I just wrote, the narrative that was being pushed at the time, that you saw something in there that wasn't aligning to what you saw with your own eyes?
Well, none of it made sense. But even before we get to 2020, I had already realized in my life that whatever the government says is, generally speaking, the opposite of the truth. So when you realize the reality you're being presented is the opposite of the truth, when they go really, really out of their way to convince you of something by spending hundreds of millions of dollars on propaganda, which is what news is, it's propaganda, then if something is true, why do you have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to convince people if it's true? It would just be inherently true. Do I need to convince you that the sky is blue, or that oxygen is useful, or like, do I have to convince you of anything that is just normal stuff? Of course not. So as soon as they do this big massive push, I'm like, okay, here we go. Here comes the next one. But it's once you wake up to what government is and how they function, and the strings that are actually pulling governments, that they're not the ones ultimately with the power. But once you're aware that you're living in opposite land, you don't you just know, like, it's not a surprise anymore, because everything is opposite land. Look at the food pyramid. All the really unhealthy stuff's what they want you to eat, and all the really good stuff's the stuff they tell you shouldn't eat. Look at, like, they're putting fluoride in the tap water. They're putting a neurotoxin in the water. This is what they're doing. Why would we listen to
Just
these
to
people?
interrupt you really quickly with that. I mean, if anyone is confused about that, I mean, there was a federal case that just got passed to where now the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S., can no longer say that fluoridation in the water is safe, which means that municipalities within the U.S. basically will have to stop doing that because there's no justification as to the safety of it. So again, that's something that was known for a long time, and now on a federal level, there's actually justification saying that essentially de facto fluoridation in water is not safe. So sorry to interrupt you for that. Just
Yeah, yeah.
a little fact check on my end.
It's just we're living in opposite land. It's just really that simple, and it's across the board. It's across the board. Um, it's a rare thing that they ever tell us the truth about anything. It's like, you spot it and you go, oh, look, they told us something, and it's only to have it seem like, oh yeah, things are normal because they just talk about the truth over here. But any major piece of information is opposite land. All they do is lie and manipulate, and work on fear and separation. It's been fear and separation from as soon as they invented media. It's like fear, separation, uh, all the way across the board. So I wouldn't say there's anything even that special about 2020, other than they just all came together. All the governments and all the media and everybody, and they pushed this thing down our throat really, really hard all at once, which is a massive red flag. It's clearly a coordinated effort. It was really, really obvious to anybody with two brain cells that it was a show. It was a coordinated show, a launch. Somebody asked me, what's the best internet marketing product launch of all time? And my answer is COVID-19 pandemic. Greatest internet global marketing launch of all time, all across the board, every TV station, internet, all over, the placards, buses, everywhere. Best marketing campaign ever. Pandemic. It was amazing, and it was just obvious. And that's in the freedom movement. We were shocked that people couldn't see it. That to us, we're just looking at each other like, is this like what we could not believe people were going through it. We could not believe it. And I think a big part of that also, I'll just mention, is that because our true nature is unconditional love. That's what the creator is. That's what we all are. So because humans are fundamentally good, it's difficult for us to comprehend that other people, other beings may actually be working against humanity, that people could fundamentally be doing really, really, really evil things, because we would never do that. We would never poison the water or poison the food or force people to take an injection that's going to destroy your immune system and reduce your time on the planet. We would never do that. So we cannot enter a reality. Most humans cannot enter a reality where other people would pull something like that off. Like, that's impossible, because we're not psychopaths. But there are people on the planet that are psychopaths, and for them, it's not just possible. They've done it, and they're still doing it. And that's just a reality that people are going to have to accept. Otherwise, They may not be here that much longer in their current incarnation, which is fine because they'll reincarnate if they need to. But unfortunately, we're actually entering a time where you need to actually see reality for what it is, or you may be exiting the reality. I could go way deeper on that, but I'll just end it there. It's wakey time on a really big level.
So when did you start speaking out though? Because again, like you said something, if someone had a brain, they could see it. But the reality is most people didn't. The vast majority of people didn't. I
I
also read a
realize
really
I
interesting
insulted everyone
study
there.
where
Sorry, everybody.
I read a really interesting study where it was kind of saying it was during the pandemic, and it was essentially like who believed in the government information, media information. And it was really interesting. And to me, it made a lot of sense. Basically, what it said is that most people do, but there was two groups who didn't, or who were more skeptical. One, it was people with almost no education, or people who were highly, highly educated. And I don't mean like a university degree or master's degree, like people who really, really had some sort of very, very high level specialty. Those people and people who had almost no education were the people who tended to be more skeptical. Almost everyone else, which was probably 80 or 90% of the population, tended to go along more with the narrative. That narrative was very, very strong. I mean, probably the strongest that's ever been seen. I mean, certainly in terms of a global concerted effort at a very particular narrative. So again, like where for you, because I imagine, like, even for most people, again, 2 weeks in, maybe you're still, I don't know, let's see, maybe this is something new. Maybe I don't know what's going on. But what was it for you that allowed you to begin to speak out?
Well, there was a few factors. Number one, uh, there's a lot of factors. I was used to speaking out. So I was already warning people about government and the economic system was a scam. Like I've been talking about this stuff for a long time because I've been an influencer since kind of I started going viral around 2010, 11. So I've been speaking my mind for a long time, and I've been in a position to do that because I have my own successful business. I don't need to. I can't be fired. You can't fire me. And I was socially free, and I know people that follow me, they know what I'm about. And so I could just speak my truth, and if you don't like it, you don't like it, but nobody could really do anything about it. So I'm used to speaking my truth, and that's not something a lot of people can say, but it is something that was just normal for me at that point. So that's number one. That's a couple of points there, I suppose. The financial thing is big, right? Because like when you can lose your income, as we saw, people will go along with a lot of crazy stuff if you keep getting paid. You know what I'm saying? Like that's disturbing if you really think about that. That's really disturbing, but it is the case as we've seen, and that's what's so sneaky about the current financial system. It's like people do a lot of things that are out of integrity for money because they value money over truth, over integrity, over connection to source, over helping your fellow man. People value money. That's what the system has been created for to a big degree. So yeah. So waking up to that reality, knowing who you are, being able to speak out, having your own income, and not being plugged into the matrix, that allows somebody to speak their truth. So yeah, for me it was a no-brainer because I knew they're gonna maim and take out a lot of people with this thing. So if, I can't. I was surprised that other people didn't see it and weren't speaking out. I couldn't believe it. Even people close to me, even people who know me and know that I'm dedicated to helping people and have been working with men for a long time and helping people improve their lives. People who know what I'm about, when I'm like, guys, this doesn't add up. Here's why. Here are the reasons. Blah blah blah. People are so deep in the trance. They just can't go there because their entire reality would collapse. And for someone who hasn't had a taste of their true nature, it's too much. It's too much. It's really, really too much for most people who are still in their ego and their personality substructure who have not touched the divine to face maybe that everything they believe is just not true. That's an ego death, a very big one, and most people aren't ready for that. But if you've done copious amount of plant medicines, or you've just had mystical, crazy ass spiritual experiences and ego deaths, dying is fine. It's good for you to keep dying, because every time a little piece of you dies, you get closer and closer to the truth and closer to the divine. So death is not a scary thing if you've already touched your true nature. But for a normal person who's not on that path, and they're just totally plugged into the matrix, it's terrifying. They will avoid waking up at any cost. And even to this day, most people are still in denial. To this day, most people are still in denial, and it's everywhere. People are getting sick everywhere, dropping dead. Certain countries have come straight out and called this that it was all a hoax. Many influencers are talking about it. Many people are talking about it, and a huge amount of people are still like, no, just don't look at that. But we're entering a point where everyone's going to have to, and that's when it might get really more interesting.
So what was that like for you in Canada? I mean, because Canada went very authoritarian. If there's any Canadians listening, and you don't see that, it may be something to look into, because vis-a-vis a lot of the world, Canada was very authoritarian. Those were justified by government officials as to why they did it. But when you look at the statistics, a country like Sweden, who had some of the most open liberal policies, which is also very interesting. It's very liberal policies, and the countries that often consider themselves very liberal had very authoritarian policies. But when you look at all-cause mortality, Sweden had the lowest, or at least one of the lowest in the world of countries who kept statistics. So that speaks a lot there. But being in Canada, which was very authoritarian, people, very much went along with the narrative. So you're there, you're speaking out. What was that like? Also a lot of the media would label people like yourself or anyone speaking out as right-wing, fascist, misogynist, sexist, transphobic. But I think for anyone who actually went to those rallies, or who actually was there surrounded by people, there was a lot of love. I mean, there was a lot of union, of bringing people together, of people who really believed in something and were taking a stand. What was that like as you went around Canada, speaking out, doing videos? What was that experience like for you? Because that's also something that's very unique. Again, not many people did that. So I think not many people actually have an insight as to what that actually looked like, what it felt like.
It was amazing. It was the greatest, most exciting time of my life. I've never met so many heart-centered, beautiful, brave people as I did in the Canadian freedom movement. Honestly, it was unbelievable. No, there were some people who are still angry and whatever, doing their best, but overall it was a phenomenal experience, because I met all the other people who had the courage to speak out and were doing something. So those were the most amazing people. That's why the planet is flipping right now, because all those amazing people have come together and are friends and are now building the new systems and the new structures and everything that's happening right now. A huge amount of it is because of all of us coming together. So for me, it was really the greatest gift of all time, and really, really magical. I can't express how much love and joy and hope, and how many amazing friendships were formed during that period. I'm sure all across the world, but certainly in Canada. It's unbelievable. The rallies, the speeches, the underground parties. Oh my God. I was having the best times. Like, I remember one time, it was a few months into lockdown, so nobody was doing anything. And, I was building up, a secret group of people, to potentially have underground comedy shows. And I had a party, right? I had a party at my place, and a bunch of people showed up. I was supposed to have a comedy show in my basement at like 8 p.m. Dude, I couldn't get people out of the kitchen into the basement. Like, people were having so much fun just eating food and hanging out with each other and having a great time talking and connecting. And I was
You were like a typical government official. You went against the lockdown policies
exactly
and had a bunch of parties.
100% typical. And I had this beautiful moment of realization where I was looking at all these people in my kitchen just connecting and eating food and having so much fun. And it hit me that this was fundamentally what the forces that were didn't want people to experience, is that beautiful connection, face to face. This is the human experience. This is what hit me. This is the human experience. This is the human experience. People meeting each other and eating food and talking and hanging out with each other from a place of love. That is the human experience right there. It's one of the most beautiful things that we do as a species, and that is exactly what they wanted to stop. No more hugging, no more loving, no more connecting. Be home, be afraid, mask up, take your shots, stay away from everybody. And it just hit me that they're literally trying to destroy the human experience itself. And it hit me in that moment so profoundly. Yeah. And it was amazing. And the underground shows we did were unbelievable. The rallies it was the greatest time. And I ended up going across I ended up doing a comedy tour across Canada. I met the most mind-blowing humans. And at one point I had to sneak out of Canada. That was a funny story. You could as an unvaccinated person, I wasn't able to like fly, take trains, eat in restaurants with my friends. So at one point, we actually rented a private plane and we hopped over the border into Montana just to get out of Canada. And that's a whole story. But that was extremely fun. And getting into Montana and just seeing normal people just walking around living normal life. Where in Canada, literally like crazy ass lockdowns where I can't go into a restaurant was one of the funniest and just one of the most beautiful experiences is getting into the States and just hanging out with normal people back in like, it was like 2022 or end of 2021, wherever it was. Unbelievable. Truly unbelievable. Yeah. Magical times.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm here in Peru. I went to a birthday party of a 8-year-old son of a friend of mine, and a bunch of kids there, and clown, and they were all singing and dancing and hugging each other, and it really hit me that for up until recently, for the last 3 or 4 years, like that was taken away from kids. Like they couldn't do that, and there was a fear, and to see them all of a sudden now out of that fear was beautiful. It was beautiful. At the same time, it was very strange how we've almost just kind of forgotten that, and I think it's also a very typical trauma response is people do want to forget. They want to move on, and they also don't want to acknowledge their own part in that. And so it's much easier to forget, to not inquire about things. And yet that's one of the really valuable things about history, which is that old kind of adage, which is learn from history or you will repeat the same mistakes. And yet it seems like very few people want to talk about what happened or want to inquire or want to look into it or actually want to look at the statistics or see what's actually happening. Do you also see that? And is that something you still feel passionate about trying to remember or bring accountability? Or do you also just feel it is time to move on to other things as well?
Yeah, that's a very juicy question. I would say I'm more leaning now, like it's been a really, really big process. I really believe all beings, we're on a spiritual journey of discovering our true nature, which is love. And that's something that was really profound for me during that period because I still had anger. I was angry at the forces that be. I was angry at what we refer to as the sheeple who were going along with it and like taking their shots and all this kind of stuff. And I noticed that during some of the freedom rallies, we weren't being necessarily that loving. Some people in our march would like yell at people wearing masks, like, "Oh, take off your mask, you sheeple," all this kind of stuff. And I had moments of like, "Whoa, there's some anger here. There's some judgment here. This is what the government does. We shouldn't be behaving this way. We need to be coming from love." Right? That's what we need to be doing. So it was a big evolution for me to actually see the perfection of what was happening and choose to be that love and to really always come from that loving place, even when I was trying to flyer someone or explain to someone the agenda or trying to, and it wasn't easy and I failed many times, believe me, because I was triggered and because I was frustrated because it was so crazy what was going on. So it's a continual evolution for me to really be loving in all my interactions with people. But at this point, there's a much bigger pull for me to build the new world that we all want to be living in and focus on that love and that unity and those new systems and those new beliefs and those new technologies than trying to wake people up that are still asleep in the beast system. I will help anyone that asks me for help. If somebody Like they're on somebody who really loves the Matrix, they're on their waiting list for their 9th booster shot. They think it's all great. And they message me like, hey dude, I'm starting to have doubts about this. Can you send me a video or can you talk to me? Absolutely, I will help you. But I'm not going to actively spend my life force energy trying to convince anybody that's not after my help to wake up. I'm not trying to force anyone to wake up, as we can't. That's really, I've learned that. I think I speak for a lot of people in the freedom movement that will tell you we learned you cannot force people into awakening. Each soul, it has to come from within. Each soul has to have their own moment where they go, hang on a second, there's got to be more to life. Something is wrong here. You know what I'm saying? Like each soul has to want to awaken. And there's a couple of different awakenings happening. There's waking up to the world is not what it seems and we're being lied to. That's one. That's a big one, and that's the one we're kind of talking about mainly in this conversation. People need to want that, and I'm happy to help them. And then, of course, there's the spiritual awakening, right, which can happen to anyone, anytime. Same thing. A soul needs to feel like, hang on a minute, am I really just this temporary human being? What happens when we die? There must be more to it. It can't just be like you live for every 75 years and then it's all over. That has to come from within for a being to really want to wake up to that much bigger truth of what we are. So I would say that spiritual awakening, that's really my biggest passion, of helping people remember their true nature as that eternal consciousness that we are, and also waking up to the matrix, reality and BS. But people got to want it. That's all I would say to people. Stop wasting your time trying to get to people who don't want to hear, but forget about it. Live your life. Do what you love. Be in such a high vibration. Be the best version you can be. And that will magnetize other people that are also living their purpose. They will come to you, and together we will all build the new earth. And for the people still in the old system, if you keep shining your light, the ones that start to question, they start to wonder, is this really what life is about? Taking your booster shots and paying your taxes and just doing what? Some of those people will see your light and they will start to come to you and say, can we talk? I'm starting to doubt some of the things. You know what I'm saying? And then help them. But we can't be out there trying to force down people's throat. We can't. It's just, there's no time for it. And it energetically it's a waste of time and energy. And I've come to understand it's actually spiritually not in alignment, because every soul is on their unique journey of awakening. And when a soul needs your help, people will ask you and say, can you help me? But if they're not asking, let people experience what they need to, including can be terrible suffering and making really bad choices, because that's the journey that they've chosen for themselves. And ultimately it will lead to their awakening. But it's not up to us to decide how quickly or on what schedule someone else needs to get it. They'll start figuring out on their time. That's that.
I think that's a really important point. Certainly in any sort of medical field, but really I think any field, even psychological fields, there's something even in terms of ethics about only helping when someone asks for help, because otherwise you get into a really strange dynamic of, are you actually helping or are you actually pushing something onto someone? Kind of as we begin to maybe wrap up the COVID part, maybe before we move on to something else, the one of the videos that you did that went really viral, which I think you alluded to in the beginning, I think it's just such a fascinating video, because you are out in public during COVID speaking what you speak, which you would think in any developed country that believes in democracy and ideals of freedom of speech, although Canada doesn't technically have freedom of speech, but believes it does. So with that idea of speaking your mind and being in kind of multi-plural societies, multi-ethnic societies where we do value people's opinions and their ways of looking at the world. So you're doing that. And interestingly, I believe it was a medical doctor actually physically assaults you with a bicycle through the window. And even though there's something comical about it, but there's also something very, very fascinating about that someone who's a medical doctor would turn to violence to silence a disseminating voice.
That is quite a thing, isn't it? Well, that whole incident was just like only the creator could have lined that up. Like that was just unbelievable all the way through. All the signs leading up to the incident. If people watch the original video and you look at the shops, behind, like everything is so ominous leading up to that beautiful moment. It was amazing. It was amazing, and it's just so funny, the way it went down. The fact that I think the thing that really touched people the most is the fact that even after me being attacked, basically the guy, it was attempted murder on camera. Like the guy tried to kill me with a bike. That's what was going on. But the fact that I just stayed centered and I was like, hey, bro, listen, I still love you. You've been psyoped. You need to wake up. But, saying whenever you're ready. The fact that I didn't get out of the car and beat him up or or just lose it completely. The fact that I was like, hey, bro, you need to wake up. That really struck people. There was a lot of comments, especially from Americans, talking about how they would have, used their guns and it wouldn't have ended so well for the assailant. So that for me, that was a profound message in there, that even if you're in integrity and you're doing what you think is right and somebody violently attacks you and you could defend yourself and you could be angry and you could be violent, you choose not to do so because it's not the highest path. To have compassion for someone who's brainwashed in that moment and to stay in your center, that was juicy. That was important. But the comedy of it is the fact that the guy who attacks me, who it turns out, that the guy's not just a cancer doctor. The gentleman is the head, still to this day, earning over $400,000 a year, the head of BC Cancer, a cancer doctor, and his name is Dr. Kimchi. And the irony that kimchi, the food, is actually a cancer preventative, is a cosmic joke that's just too delicious not to play on. And so when we realized that, we had a giggle, as you can imagine, and we decided to do something to kind of have a little bit of fun with the situation. But before I mention that, I did, the police, this is interesting. The police actually, when they showed up and they saw the situation, what was going on, the sergeant, I won't name him, but the sergeant that was there on the scene, when he realized the situation, he actually looked at me and he said, what you're doing is very important and you should keep doing it. And you should file charges against this guy, because if you don't, he's going to hurt someone else. So please take the time and fill out the report correctly so this guy goes behind bars. This is the sergeant that was on the case. So that's what happened. Now, of course, surprise, surprise, charges were not laid against this gentleman. I got a Freedom of Information request, and it said that it was not in the public interest for the Crown to prosecute the case. Interesting. Well, once we found out who he was, we understand why the Crown wouldn't want to put one of their people behind bars, because that's not what they do. But anyway, it was a beautiful gift. It woke up a lot of people. A lot of people got laughs out of it. It was all good. And in the end, through a bit of divine inspiration, we decided to have a little bit of fun with it. And me and some friends decided to start a project that's fun. It's become more than that, but it began as a cryptocurrency that actually spreads knowledge about ways to deal with cancer naturally and authentically, that work with nature, that work with the body, to basically start a crypto that gets the information out and actually gets funding to people with cancer so they can work with natural practitioners to reverse the condition. And we named it after this dude. We said, well, what if Dr. Kimchi was an enlightened master? What would he do? He would cure cancer. He would help people with cancer authentically. So we started a crypto that actually does that in his name, and it's doing good things. We literally distributed tens of thousands of dollars recently in our currency that have gone to practitioners that now are using these funds to help people overcome cancer who do not have money for cancer treatment. People that would have potentially gone to chemotherapy and other basically fatal solutions that are actually going to hopefully overcome and continue living their lives. So that's what we did. We turned this incident into a meme coin that does good, and it's growing as we speak. It's kind of getting a life of its own, and we think it's pretty good and pretty funny what we're doing.
Amazing. So you spoke about kind of the spiritual path. One of the first words that I thought was interesting used in the beginning was Christ consciousness, and I think a lot of people understand that, they're familiar with that. I think also in a lot of circles, kind of as we were talking about, as societies do become more atheistic, rational, reductionist, the idea of religion has really become separated, some by design. You can even argue for the good, but it's become separated. And I think, as you mentioned, and again, I think if you spoke about this 50 years ago, there would be maybe more understanding. But also in recent times, I think there would have been a lot of pushback that this idea of religion or spirituality is important, and that when you disconnect people from spirit, whether that's through religion or their own spiritual practice, their own connection to God, people suffer. And I think that's one of the fundamental things that you see around the world, and especially in terms of things like plant medicines or sacraments, that they were fundamental aspects of not only people's being, but their worldview, their cosmovision. I was actually interviewing a really interesting guy. He'll probably come out before this episode, so it's probably a good segue. But he lived a long time with a group of people called the Shipibo people. Probably most of the people listening to this podcast will be familiar with them, but they're plant specialists, and they're very well known for working with ayahuasca. So he studied ayahuasca with them for a long time, and one of the early people to do that. I mean, now I think there's a lot, but I really respected his knowledge. But he said something that was very fascinating, and it was something I never necessarily really thought about. But he said that this idea of consciousness and cosmovision are actually intertwined, that you can't have consciousness without cosmovision. And I think there's something very profound about that, that our worldview is actually fundamental to this idea of consciousness, and our consciousness is fundamental to our idea of our worldview. And when you separate those, when you take that away from people, there's a huge disconnect. And I think that's why these traditional societies all over the world had these sacraments, that religion or spirituality was a fundamental part of their being, which also, kind of as we were talking about earlier, the disconnect from that is communism. It is something that's, also the nature of something like communism is destructive. It's evil, you could say. So people have a really beautiful way of putting that, which is their word for good is hakun. And hakun, it means truth. And what does truth mean on a deeper level? It means that which is life-giving, that which is creation. That's why God is the creator. That's why humans are in the image of God. We have the power to create. The negation of that word, hakun ma, it means not good, which means it's not true, which means it's creating division, separation. And I think these ideologies like communism, they're separating, they're destructing, and it's much easier to destroy than it is to build. So kind of going back to that idea of the power of spirituality, the power of religion. When you're using that word, kind of the Christ self that's within, when you're going on the spiritual journey for yourself, what you mentioned maybe like COVID. It's we all have a path. We're all born into a particular time, a space, a body, a role that we have to fill. So potentially some of that is your role, but what was that journey like for you? Was there? Do you think some of that stemmed from your childhood, of this place of suffering, of these different paths you've been on? That even maybe there was something you were longing for, this deeper connection, and that led you to begin to seek, seek and you shall find. And what was that path like for you? Of we spoke a little bit by phone, but I know there was points that were very difficult for you. Often when you have these kind of big experiences, it can actually be very, very challenging, because as you said, your worldview begins to shatter, and that's kind of the scariest thing people can do. Which, kind of going back to the COVID thing, that's why so many people resist that, because it can be very scary to have your worldview shattered, because then what do you have to stand on? The things that we think were important, or the things we think we want to rely on, if those are no longer there, then who are we? What do we actually believe? Who are we on a deeper level beyond the surface? And that can be very terrifying. So again, a big question, but maybe if you can just talk a bit about that path for you, because I think that's something that especially viewers would be very interested in.
The question of all questions. I think we all have that within us. I think every soul wants to know who and what they are. I think every single soul. I think it's just a matter of how badly and how conscious we are of that desire. So for me, I became aware of that, like really aware of that, somewhere around age 30, maybe a little bit before, um, like on a conscious level. I was reading this spiritual book, this one spiritual book by this Japanese master, and I was reading this book, and I had my first like really quite profound spiritual awakening experience. 2009, it just hit me, boom, and I remembered, not everything, but I remembered that we're eternal beings. There's no such thing as death, and we're all here to help each other on our journey, and that I was here to remind other beings that of this truth that we're eternal beings and we're here on a journey. So I had this first. It was like a lightning bolt. It was like bam, and after, and that's in some ways that was the beginning. Now, how did I manifest that? Was it destined to happen on because of the stars and the alignment or in my soul's mission and blah blah blah, or is it because I was reading this book and I was doing certain? Who can say 100%? But for me, I had that initial awakening, and after that awakening, that was it. I had to go deep. I had to fully live what I had experienced, and I needed to know more. I needed to know. You can't just go from like I'm a being, and maybe there's a God, maybe not, and probably just die after this, and it's all over. I had many of these. Even I would say it was even an atheist at one point in my late teens, early 20s. I didn't really believe in God or any of this stuff. I didn't. I thought people were crazy because I associated religion with spirituality, and a lot of the religions are really out of alignment, and I could see they were out of alignment. So I wrote off the whole thing. Okay, so but once I had that awakening, I really wanted to know. I wanted to know, who am I? What's the purpose of life? What happens when we die? Is there a God? Like, I needed to know, bro. And it was mixed up with in there with healing with me too, because I was really still traumatized and didn't love myself and had a lot going on. So it was really a healing and awakening journey. And I went hardcore, dude. I went hardcore, man. I went to Peru. I started working with ayahuasca in 2012. I'd worked with other plant medicines as well, including San Pedro, and a bunch of stuff. But I really, really wanted to know, and I went hardcore on the path, and I did everything, dude. Not just plant medicines. I did breath work. I did meditation retreat. I did breatharian initiation, like going like long periods of time without food and water, reading tons of spiritual books, chanting, channeling. Like I'm talking like, dude, I went around the world seeking enlightened masters because I wanted to be around beings who were so potentially were genuine and were enlightened and knew God. I was crazy, and I had all kinds of crazy. When you're really on that path, and I haven't met too many people that were as obsessed with me with self-realization. But when you're really on that path for real, the universe, which is yourself, as it turns out, it will send you teachers. It will send you experiences. It will send you what you need for your awakening. And I was extremely blessed in my journey. And I had many very high level consciousness teachers, like several enlightened masters that I didn't even realize where they were at, because I couldn't even realize at the time. But I was very blessed to have many teachers that helped me awaken. And when I started going into the full on ego, death, self-realization experiences, I was very, very lucky to be in the presence of one of my teachers, Paul Scott, who's a very high level being. He's kind of hidden. He's not like out there, but if you know, you know. And he was able to guide me in full on like it. When you really wake up, it's like you go from, you believe you're a person having a life, blah blah blah, and you realize there's no person. The person is a dream character. You are and have always been all that is forever, and you were experiencing a life, and you're still experiencing a life, but your true identity is the self. Pure love, pure consciousness, forever and ever, no beginning, no end. You are all that is forever, and you happen to be in a body right now. Yippee-ki-yay. That is a big shift. That is a big shift, man. And it's a total game changer, because when really you go through that, it's not just that you're not the same person afterwards. You're not a person. You're not a person. You are the I am consciousness, and you're playing out a human character for very specific reasons. Everyone has their own reasons for coming and playing this game, and it changes everything. It changes everything. And certainly, fear, fear of death, confusion, so many things just drop off because everything is all our fears, all the separate, it's all based in separation. All fear comes from separation from source, lack of spiritual knowledge, not knowing who you are, not knowing what you're doing here, worrying that you're going to die, worrying you're going to not have enough money or food or whatever. It's all based on the lack of knowledge that you are the I am eternal consciousness that is all beings, all life forever. That is what you are. And irregardless of how much you know that or how little you know that, doesn't change the reality that that's what every single being incarnated on this planet and everywhere else in the cosmos, that's what we all are. You can like it, you can not like it, you can believe it, you can not believe it. It changes nothing. We are all that. And so this is the fundamental piece of information that you are never supposed to think about or ponder or find out, because you cannot be controlled or told what to do when you know what you are. You cannot. So this is the main spiritual war that is happening on this planet right now. It is a war on consciousness. It is a war on truth itself. The truth that we are all one love. We're all one human family. Us and source energy, us and love are the one thing forever and ever. We always have been. We always will be. It is the nature of our reality. And they shut people up. If you get real famous talking about that shit, they don't like it. Bob Marley, one love, one life. He knew. He was enlightened. It took him out. So that's really what it comes down. This is fundamentally what's happening on the planet right now. It is a spiritual war to prevent beings from remembering their true nature, and it is the most important piece of knowledge any human being could ever attain.
So when you're speaking, you're speaking in these very archetypal, very religious actually way of speaking, which you find in religions all over the world, that there is this eternal battle between light and dark. And I think a lot of people now, again, as we become more disconnected from spirituality, they view those things as maybe primitive or more metaphorical. Why do you speak in those terms? And how much do you think is that primordial archetypal battle between light and dark, good and evil, versus just that's also what people desire? It was said by someone very smart. I can't remember who, but he said that most people don't actually want freedom. What they actually want is safety. And I think so much of what even as we were mentioning, these ideas that we don't necessarily want to be free, because that's very scary. That path is very scary, and it's much easier. You come home and you watch Netflix to take your mind off things. We do work so much. We have so many stressors, work stressors, environmental stressors, life stressors, political stressors, that it's very easy to not want to care, to just get by, to do whatever it takes to give you that little boost, that little dopamine boost, which makes you feel better, and then to go to sleep and to wake up, and much like in kind of this allopathic medical system, to just constantly treat the symptom, to make it feel a little bit better, but never to really jump off the cliff into the abyss, because that's terrifying. It's very scary. So, because you're speaking a lot in these terms of these archetypes of this good and evil. How much do you think those forces are at play, and versus how much do you think is also just people's innate desire to seek comfort at the expense of maybe something that would set them free?
Yeah, it's a really big one.
That's why I brought you on, Sasha.
Oh man, that's juicy. I like how we're getting juicy now. I think souls are all very much on their own unique journey of awakening. I think all souls are doing the same thing fundamentally, which is remembering their true nature as love. But some souls need to go through a lot of crazy stuff to want to remember that. You see what I'm saying? So, and I believe in this reality, we have the opportunity to really experience that which our soul needs for our evolution. And it's so different. It's so different for all souls. Some souls need to get 11 shots and 4 boosters. Some souls need 15 shots to wake up. Others, I'm serious. I met a guy 2 years ago who he's like, I've had 9. For real. Some souls need to manifest a car accident. Some souls need to be in a job that's absolutely destroying their soul for 50 years before they go, you know what, there must be more. I'm gonna look into the spirituality thing. It's all so different. There are souls on this planet that are billions, maybe trillions of years old, that old here as spiritual teachers and guides. And there are newer souls here who are just, maybe they're fresh. They haven't been around that long, and they're just really new, and they just believe everything they're told, and they're not even gonna think about spirituality for another 25,000 lifetimes. There might be some of those around too. So this is a very unique. This is a very unique situation that we're in, with lots and lots of beings from all over the cosmos. I believe we're all here to watch the greatest awakening. I think this is the greatest show ever. I really do. So we're all here to witness this shift, this massive planetary shift into a much, much higher level of consciousness, potentially completely. Some people call it like 5D, all these kind of terms. But I do believe we're heading into an ascension. I believe all beings on this planet will remember that we are all one. I think that's actually what we're coming into. But there may be those who really aren't ready for that. And we see a lot of people leaving their bodies right now and leaving this reality. And that's okay too. But many, many beings are here, and I believe it's a graduation event. And it's going to be really intense leading up to this event. But I really think that we are going to see the most crazy stuff in these coming years, that beyond craziness in any sci-fi movie we're going to see that kind of stuff. We're going to see people remembering fully that they are in the Creator are one. We're going to see people doing Christ-like miracles and actions, walking around like literally. I'm talking, it is going to get beyond what anybody could possibly imagine. We're in our lifetimes, we're going to see stuff like that. And it's going to be epic. It's going to be epic. More and more people remembering that we're one, people coming from love, people coming together to co-create paradise beyond imagination is actually what's coming. That's actually what's coming. That's what this planet, it was meant to be, and that's what it's going to be. We just have to go through this planetary shakedown, awakening, and it's going to get messy, and it's going to be brutal. But I really believe all of us that are on the path of healing, on the path of love, that are doing our work, it's our job to help everyone else who's not quite where we're at in terms of awakening. It doesn't mean we're better than anybody, or we're just older, or further along, or for whatever reason we just are where we're at, and it's our duty to help our brothers and sisters in their awakening journey. And that's why it's really important for us to do our personal work, like whatever you need to do to get to a higher vibrational state. You need to cut certain habits, or bad eating habits, or cut bad relationships that aren't in integrity. If you have a job that's keeping you down, this is the time to get your stuff together and be living a life full of excitement and abundance, and just be really feeling good, because a lot of people are probably going to reach out to you and are going to need your help, because we're talking the whole planet's going to realize we've all been lied to, and we're not these separate beings, and separation is not our nature. Fear is not our nature. War is not our nature. You know what I'm saying? Like we are love. Loving is our nature. Treating each other with unconditional love, because we're all one human family. That's actually our human nature, and we're heading into that. And a lot of people are going to need help coming into that reality, because it's so different from what we've been experiencing on this planet.
So one of the things when I first met you many years ago, and there is this idea that we're all one, that we're all equal, and yet at the same time, any traditional society in the world is built on some degree of meritocracy, whether you're born into a role or you exhibit certain traits. I mean, all of these traditional societies, the role is super, super important. It's seen that everyone has a role, not necessarily better or worse, but everyone has a role, and it's really important to heed that calling. But on that idea of meritocracy, I think it's really important to also acknowledge when people do see things and when they have certain visions. And one of the things when I met you was, I think, your own insight or foresight into digital currency. And it was kind of a similar narrative that people who were into that were crackpots or conspiracy theorists, or it was all a scam, or they had no understanding of the financial system. And yet, I think people who really went into that on a deeper level, they also understood in a way that there was something, actually going back to that idea of slavery, that had the potentiality of alleviating, of freeing people from a certain bond, which certainly money can be. It doesn't have to be. Again, there's kind of the macro and the micro. On the macro, that there certainly are forces that bind us to that. And on the micro, a lot of people have, as you said, even yourself, have very unhealthy relationships to money. They have a lot of trauma around it. It can be a scarcity mentality. And it's a reality. I mean, depending on the conditions you're born into, like, money is a real thing, and there is a scarcity of it, and people are trying to gain more to better their lives. But I think a lot of people, and again, I think probably in this podcast, it's a deep rabbit hole to go into about the whole financial system. But simply in that idea of digital currency, there is something, and not with all of them, but with certain ones, that it's a way of looking at the world, a way of looking at money that is trying to decentralize something, detach something from a power structure that controls that, to put that power more into your hands. And there is something very creative about that aspect. It's creation. It's a force that's driving to create, to free, to open, to bridge, to unify. And I think it's important to recognize when people do have that vision, because, I mean, also if you look at the kind of digital currency charts right now, I mean, they've skyrocketed, especially in the last few weeks, but it's been a steady increase. I mean, I think I remember Bitcoin at around $400, and now I think it's over 100,000. So someone had that foresight, and a lot of people didn't, and I think it's also important to recognize that. But I think you're someone who's very familiar with that. What insight can you give people? Like, why is that such a powerful tool? Why is that one of the tools? Because you also mentioned you started this project, Drkimchi, which is based around digital currency. Why do you put so much emphasis on that? I think it's one of those things where more people, simply because of the value of it, the fiscal value of it, are waking up to it. But more than just the value of it, what is the principle that you believe is so important around digital currency?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I believe Bitcoin was invented so people could trade with each other without interference from other powers, banks, governments. Simple as that, without being taxed, without being told what they can and can't do. Very, very simple. Because that is fundamentally how there's many ways we're controlled, but the financial system is fundamentally a part of why we're in a slave system right now. And that it's a big, long story, but people should, it's a big one. The central banks, they literally print money at their whim. They deflate the currency. And you got to work really, really hard. And then to get this fake money and then pay taxes on it, it's so beyond insane. And everything you do, they get a piece, because the government's basically a gang, and they get their piece. But with crypto, especially, certain cryptos like Monero, for example, you can interact with other people. You can be anonymous, so you can do business and trade with other people in private, and that's never, you know what I'm saying? And that's and digitally, and you can have a lot of wealth, basically just by memorizing your certain your passphrase to get into your wallet. You could basically have in your head whatever amount of wealth that you have. You can cross borders with it. Nobody can take it off you. I mean, it's a revolution. Normally you'd have to have like tons of, whether it's money or gold or whatever. You got to have security and put it in a safe and all this kind of stuff. You can just have your wealth in a simple passphrase that you've memorized, or it's insane. So that's fundamentally what it's been used for. Is a store of wealth and a way to trade with each other. But I believe that crypto was actually, I believe there was a greater purpose for it. I believe it's that we could actually build a new world without permission from the forces that were. I think that's the point of it, that we could build new healing centers, that we could fund other projects that are for the benefit of all beings without the government coming and saying, no, you can't do that. Oh, you got a free energy device? No, you can't do that. Or, oh, this helps people be super healthy and they don't need the medical system? No, we're not going to, you can't fund that. That's illegal. You see what I'm saying? Like, because they control the money and they control the legal system, all this kind of stuff, they can shut down, and they have been shutting down anything that is a threat to their system. But if we have our own currency, and we can do really good things and not be stopped, and that's really, really, really huge. And I just want to share something that's really interesting here. So currency, energy, right? It's really, really interesting. There's a movie called Shillings from Heaven. Everybody should go watch this movie, because you'll learn in this movie about this little town in Austria where they didn't have any physical money, but they had workers and they had a factory, and there was no work for anybody because they couldn't pay people with money. And so what the mayor did was he said, well, look, let's just make these work certificates, and people can go to the factory and we'll pay them in work certificates that say you worked 8 hours. And then people in the farmers and other shops could start taking these work certificates. And they just started doing this experiment in this town called Wurgel. It became extremely successful. Other mayors were coming from all over the country to check it out. And of course, the government came, and eventually they shut it down. Because what you realize when you watch that movie is that money is we don't need it. It's a dream. We're working hard for money. We don't need the money. It's just a permission slip. It's just a promissory note saying, if I give you value, you're going to give me some value later. Well, we can do that without these pieces of paper issued by a central bank or given to us by a government. We don't need that. And if you watch that movie, you will have a realization that it's human beings that have created all wealth, all value. It comes from our consciousness and our labor, and we don't need a third party of any kind to regulate that. Left alone, humans with their own currency and their own energy, we will come up with the solutions and the systems to build paradise on earth. And so crypto is a part of that, and it cannot be stopped. And that's why now they're just going, yeah, it's great. Let's because they can't stop it. And this is why we're going to see a lot of changes on the planet, because as people have their awakening to really what's going on, as people start to remember that we're all part of this divine unfoldment, people are going to start funding epic healing centers, technologies, great projects that are doing amazing things that can't be stopped. And so we're going to see more and more capital flow into these alternative systems. And we're going to see massive changes on the planet. And that's basically why, for one of these, we started our own cryptocurrency, the Drkimchi coin on the Solana network. It's a meme token, but it's actually spreading information that's really important for people to heal if they manifest cancer. Because if you actually understand what cancer is, it's there as a reminder and a wake-up call, and it's an opportunity for you to grow and evolve. And that's knowledge that can save a lot of people's lives. And we're actually getting funding to people that have cancer to work with practitioners who have solutions, because the solutions have always been there. But again, part of this system that we're in, they make money by keeping you sick, getting you sick and keeping you sick, and then selling you something that gets you even sicker and eventually takes you off the planet. That's the system that we're in. That's the level of that's just the reality of it. So we decided to do this because it's a good way for people to have this awakening of really what cancer is and what the system is. So you can wake up to that, and you can learn how to actually be healthy and not fall victim to the agenda that they got going on. It's bad out there, man. It's like we're getting up to like 1 in 2 people get that condition. It's especially after the shots and stuff. This is just I know several people dealing with this right now. So this is it's a very relevant project right now with what we got going on.
Yeah, amazing. So as we begin to kind of wrap up, I think one of the things that's also really interesting about you, which you talked about earlier, was this idea of comedy. I think comedy is sometimes overlooked. I mean, even in my work, healing work, working with plants, there's often something very somber about it. It's very heavy. It's going into the trauma and talking and reliving and going into these things. And yet most of the traditional healers that I know, they're very lighthearted. They're very comedic. I mean, they're much more prone to making jokes about people, almost like kids. Where you make fun of each other, where you make lightness of a situation, and there is real healing in that, and there's also real truth in that. I mean, even when you look at some of these things we're dealing with in society, some of the problems, often the first people that begin to bring them out kind of to the public consciousness are comedians, because with comedy you can also get away with things. You can allude to something, but you can do it in a way that somehow doesn't make you so attached to it. It gives lightness to it. It speaks to truth, but not necessarily from a place that's divisive. And when people laugh, there is a release. And also when people laugh, it means that what you're speaking about is true. And I think that's something that's really important to realize, is that, only when there's that recognition inside, which laughter, that release, it's coming because it's touching a place inside us that's actually true. That's why we can laugh. So what is that meant for you for comedy, and why do you think that's important? Why do you think you've chosen that path, and what do you think is the role of the comic?
Well, for me, I had no choice. I was born funny, and I got to express myself, otherwise I'd go crazy. So that's me. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. If you look at certain communist regimes like Soviet Union, it was actually only the comedians that could speak the truth through comedy. They could drop little hints about what was going on, and some people would say actually it's the comedians that bring down the regime, because they're saying what people are thinking, and they're the only ones that can get away with it without being disappeared. I actually heard that the Berlin Wall came down because people were actually, this is really profound and beautiful. People were playing Beatles music, on the free side of the wall, and people on East Germany, on the east side, they were actually copying Beatles records. Like, they found a way to copy the records, and they were playing them, and there was such a resonance with that vibration and that freedom and that love. That's what tipped things over, and people started tearing the wall down because of the music, because of the vibration of truth and love in that music. Well, same thing with comedy. That the truth is in the comedy. It's not funny unless there's a degree of truth in it, right? So to be able to touch someone with that truth, they know it's true. That's why it's uncomfortable. That's why you have to laugh to let go of some of that energy, because someone just said some true shit that they weren't supposed to say, and maybe you weren't supposed to hear. So comedy is extreme. I mean, man, it is so profound, and it's so powerful. And if you have that gift, I really believe anyone out there that has a funny bone, share it, use it, write poems, write songs, do comedy, like share funny memes, like there's a meme war going on. If anybody else is in David Avocado Wolf's Telegram channel, I know I am. He's dropping hilarious memes. And if you send some of those memes to some of your friends that haven't got it yet, they just might start waking up, because it's that funny and truthful. So it is a really, really powerful gift. And it's also very healing for people to actually laugh. To actually laugh is extremely powerful. Once in a while, actually, for many years, I run this workshop called Comedy Therapy and Authentic Communication. And I get people to actually see the humor in their trauma and in their messed up childhoods, so they can laugh at themselves. Because when you start laughing at yourself, you start expressing authentically who you are, not just the perfect, oh, look at me, I'm so perfect on my Instagram. No, the messed up, not perfect, version of you, with the trauma and the worries and the fears that everyone else has. And when you can actually laugh at that and present that more authentic version of you, it gives everyone else permission to actually be themselves and face their truth. And so this has been so relevant during the pandemic. If you can laugh and put stuff out there, and actually get people to see something and laugh and think differently, they might just be able to start looking at things in a different way, see something that they didn't want to look at, but you made them laugh, and you got through, and oh wait, there's a seed of truth there that you just laughed at. Well, maybe you're going to have to look at that a little bit more now, you see? So being able to laugh at truth, whether it's out there in the world or our own traumas and our own belief systems, it is a way to break through. It really is. This is why you'll never see politicians laughing and cracking jokes. This is why Donald Trump is such a fascinating character and isn't really a politician, because he's actually laughing and joking around and having a good time. But actual politicians, they're very serious. Because if you laugh, you're gonna laugh your ass off and you're gonna see through everything if you're able to laugh. So they have to keep their character and be very serious, and because laughter is it's poison. It's poison to communism. It's poison to tyranny. It's poison to lies. So that's why it's such a rare thing to see comedians that are really, really. This is why if you ask me like who are your favorite comics, I would say Richard Pryor. Ripping into himself and being authentic and vulnerable. Bill Hicks, just tearing into the system. Richard Carlin. So there's been a few really amazing truth telling comedians out there, but not that many, because it's scary and it's dangerous to really speak the truth, even in comedy. There's not that many, and I'm really happy to see in the recent years we've actually seen comedians who are funny, who are telling the truth and pointing it out, pop off. And every time I see somebody going viral that's telling the truth, I'm like, thank God, because in 2020, 2021, I was making my funny videos. For a while there, I couldn't find anybody. I'm just like, what is with these comedians? They're going along with the narrative. You're supposed to be the one telling the truth and pointing out the insanity. And what happened to the real comedians? And so I'm very happy that now we actually have people out there that are really doing it, and that brings me joy. But anyway, to answer the question, comedy is extremely important in any society if you don't want to descend into absolute tyranny.
Well, amazing, Sasha. We're at 2 hours. That flew by. Is there anything we didn't touch on, which you want to talk about that's still on your mind?
My God, it was a great chat. Whatever way it goes is the way it goes. It was a wonderful chat. I think the only thing I was going to say was that just to touch on one point, which was it was very profound to be bringing love into the freedom movement. And I noticed that it was very profound during one period during that time when the official narrative was, you will get used to the new normal. You will own nothing and be happy. We've all heard that line. And they just kept putting this out there, the new normal. And Spirit one day told me, well, no, love is the new normal. And Spirit was like, okay, you're gonna start making these. And I just started making these shirts that say, love is my new normal. And on the back, they say, choose love. And I would go to these freedom rallies and there'd be people yelling and, whatever. And I would come up to people and say, hey, brother, guess what? I got a gift for you. Or other people would just see me wearing the shirt and say, hey, I like your shirt. And I'd say, hey, I have one for you. And I would say, hey, take this. It's organic cotton. I hope you like it. I give people a hug. And it was extremely profound during that period to be spreading that message. Choose love. Love is my new normal. And to bring that into the freedom rallies and into certain protests and other videos we made, I think that really made a difference in our freedom movement in British Columbia and throughout Canada. And I know some of those videos have been seen all over the world. And you can find links to all that on my website. But that was one of the most profound things I'd ever seen in my life is to be bringing that love, even in such conditions of disharmony and fear, and there's a pandemic and so much division, to still do the best that you can to choose love in every moment. So that would be my message to everybody out there, even though it's crazy and it's confusing and everything that's going on. To the best of your ability in every moment, can we be love? And that would be the takeaway.
Well, beautiful, Sasha. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time. If people are interested in your comedy and in your work, what you're doing, and the Drkimchi Project, and learning more about holistic medicine, if they want to contact you, maybe what are the best ways to do that?
My main website has pretty much links to everything I'm doing. So that's alexthecomic.com. And then I'm on Instagram, also Alex the Comic. And so you'll find all the links, people, if you're interested in the crypto project. It's drkimchi.xyz. But yeah, I got a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, check it out. And if you're meant to connect with me, you shall.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. I consider you a brother. We've had an interesting trajectory together. We didn't even talk about our near-death experience. Maybe on the next one we'll do that. But those kind of things bond each other. I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate all you've done, man, of bringing your light into the world, of speaking the truth, of all of the different things you've done. I think it's really in the pursuit of truth and the pursuit of beauty. And there's not a lot of people like that in the world. As you said, I think we all have that potentiality. And I think the more people like you can begin to shine a light and show that things are possible, it is like a beacon that allows people to see that there's other ways of looking at the world. There's other cosmovisions, and that does change your consciousness and it changes who you are. And as you said, I think all of our goal is to bring people together, to build love, to spread truth, to create. And so I'm thankful for you. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure people will get a lot out of this episode, and I look forward to talking to you again, and hopefully to cross paths with you sometime here soon in the coming future.
Well, listen, I have to thank you. Thank you for seeing me, because not everybody does. Some people just think I'm crazy. But I will also say, genuinely, you are really a testament to personal work. Just in talking to you, your level of peace and presence that you've had in this talk, and I suspect in your life, is really a testament to what is possible if you actually do the work. Because I've been on a lot of shows and spoken to a lot of people, and not very many are actually like really present, really peaceful, really there. So thank you for actually doing the work to become this version of yourself. That is also seen and appreciated.
Well, amazing, my friend. Well, thank you very much. It's beautiful seeing you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, looking forward to hugging you. Peace out, brother.
All right, everyone, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, a little bit of a different conversation that I usually have. I think Sasha's a fascinating guy. He's really, I think, he's been at the forefront of a lot of these issues we spoke about, very correct in a lot of them. And I think that kind of insight and foresight is super valuable. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. As always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a really good option. It's a website you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers also give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, to all of the people supporting that way, thank you very much for your help. And if you're able to do that, I really appreciate it. It's really what allows me to continue making these episodes. I also really like that idea that it's based on reciprocity. So if you feel like you're gaining something from these episodes, that's a really nice way to give back. If you don't have the means to do that, as always, helping with the algorithms is really helpful. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, and if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. So I think that's it. My following guests, I'm actually not exactly sure who I'll have coming on. I have quite a few people lined up, but I'm not exactly sure of the exact order. But as always, I'm always trying to bring on really fascinating people. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope this finds you all well, and I will see you all on the next episode.